Hello there, welcome to a tutorial video. I just recently reorganized my entire G.I. Joe vintage collection. There's the 82 to 86 crew, the Sunbow crew as I like to call them, and then everyone 87 and beyond up there. And if you're wondering if I started from the back this time instead of from the front, because quite a few people who watched that original collection video were saying how much anxiety it was causing them because I started from the front and looked like I was going to domino the whole thing. I was going to, but then I heard a little voice inside my head that said, "Oh yeah, you could start from the back, but you wouldn't be living in the danger zone. Oh no." So, gotta live life on the edge, I guess. Anyways, I noticed while I was going through my collection that a couple of my figures have some really loose waists, and some of them the O-ring actually just completely busted. So just a disclaimer here, Mike from What's on Joe Mind, if you're watching, you're going to want to look away right now. This is one of the figures I got to repair today. Beachhead, his O-ring completely broke and he fell apart. Luckily, that didn't bust on him. So I had been actually using O-rings that I found on eBay. You can get them really, really cheap, a big bag of O-rings, and some of them even come with extra screws in case your screws in the figure's back are really rusty or dirty or something else, lost while you're trying to repair them. Also in the legs as well. The screws they used in the back are the same as the screws they used in the legs. So I had been using those, but Adam shared with me a while back some O-rings, and I didn't realize that there's actually different types of O-rings. And you can use those cheap O-rings with all the Joes, but what you're actually possibly doing is creating an extra amount of stress on this hook right here. If you're using a not ideal, not compatible O-ring. So it might seem fine to you, but over the years it might actually be maybe pulling on the post in there a little too hard or pulling this apart. That might be a reason why we get some of these parts breaking on us. So this was news to me, and just wanted to thank Adam again for sharing these with me and also giving me the heads up that this is a thing, because these figures are getting more fragile by the year. The plastic is becoming more and more brittle, so it's good to know I'll be using the proper O-rings. And got 82 to 84 is type 1, and these look a lot thinner than the kind I'm used to using. These are the standard ones that I've just been getting on eBay. Type 2, 85 and beyond. And so I like doing these side-by-side comparisons, I guess. Here they are side by side. Much thinner on the early O-rings. So I know there are a lot of O-ring repair tutorials on YouTube. I haven't watched any of them since I've been repairing G.I. Joe O-rings since I was a little kid. But I've got one little tip. I don't know if some of the other folks have mentioned this. Maybe, maybe not. But I've got one tip that will hopefully make your experience go smoother if you've never done it or if you haven't done it for a long, long time. And it is... No, I'm just kidding. It's not praying, but maybe saying a little prayer will actually help. You do need the proper tools for the job. When I was a kid, I used to just use like a knife, like a sharp pointed steak knife, because I was like 5, 6, 7. I didn't have a nice little proper set of miniature screwdrivers. So life changed when I actually got one of these little guys that didn't end up carving the inside of the hole, widening the backpack hole. But here's my little tip or thing to be very aware of and patient with. Don't just stick the screwdriver in there and just start screwing. What I'm noticing on a couple of Joes, what's happened with some of my repairs recently is that, until I became aware of this, is that I like to go extremely slow when I'm first doing that initial turn, because what will happen if you're too rough with it, you see how this is just going forward, backward, it doesn't matter. This screw is no longer being held in there, and it is because the post inside has broken. The plastic on all of the figures isn't the same. Some of it is a little tougher than others. I do find mutt is more brittle than some of the other Joe figures, but there used to be a post in here that went up flat against this guy right here, and when you put that together, the screw would screw into there, and now there's just nothing to hold on to. So that's what you want to be careful with when you're unscrewing the initial first couple turns, because it might get stuck and you might have to apply a little bit of force, but not too much. Just be very gentle with it, or that'll happen, and that's happened to me a couple of times, unfortunately, and it's all because I just went in there and just started going for broke. I want to be a little bit more patient with that. We'll take his merce off there, his man purse. And so I've never actually repaired this beachhead. And this is my original beachhead from my childhood. So it would be a real shame if I mean, you can get another beachhead. They all look the same, right? But knowing this is my actual childhood beachhead, it's kind of cool. Fixing one of my original beachheads that my mom bought me. So, yep, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's a little stiff in there. It's a little stuck, so I want to turn it ever so slightly. I felt it just move, and I'm going to continue to just be, okay. So now it's not holding as tightly anymore, and when you're fixing these guys, it's better to be a little on the cautious side than brazen, because especially with Beachhead, he's one of the more expensive G.I. Joes, and there's a crack in there. So that's probably that tightness I was feeling in there. That's exactly what happened to this mutt. See that crack going across there? The plastic has just become brittle, and yes, it's cracked. Am I bummed? Not in the least, because if I may do the optimist gimmick for a second, glass is half full instead of half empty. I will take a crack over complete and utter post-annihilation any day. And the break was so bad that there was no gluing this back together. It was like bent and skewed and past my repairing capability. I'm not the best crafty repairman there is, but this looks fine to me. I'm thinking that should hold when I screw it back together. I'm not really interested in crazy gluing that to reinforce it. We'll see how it goes. But what we're going to do now is take one of the proper O-rings that's intended for one of the 86 figures. And I know this is old hat for people who've done this thousands of times, but also keep in mind there's quite a few people watching this channel that haven't done this lots of times or haven't done it ever. And they're just kind of curious as to this whole vintage toy thing. So you feed the O-ring onto the hook, and Beachhead is notorious for having so many broken crotch pieces. So many of them, you see them on eBay or at conventions, and that's a busted piece, so definitely want to be careful there. Trickiest part is getting the O-ring through this hole right here, and what really helps is if you just have some kind of hook tool. I've always just used the screwdriver that I'm going to be using take them apart and put them back together. Just feed it through there and pull it through like so, and pop it down like that. Once you feed it through, it's not going to slip back out. You can actually even hold him by the waist, and this is a really good O-ring. It's just holding right in. And I've done this hundreds, maybe, I don't know, not thousands, but many, many times. The sequence of putting things back together. So there's the original screw, and it's in great condition. Even if the screw is kind of rusty and old and schmutzy looking, I am more inclined to just reuse the screw that was there, because even though if I got a bag of replacement screws like these right here, even if they're supposed to be the exact same size, they could be ever so slightly off. And when they're ever so slightly off, then it's too loose, or even worse, too big, which will make that crack even bigger. Take out the original O-ring. Now, how sentimental are you going to get? Do I keep this? This is my original 86 Beachhead O-ring. It's broken, but it's the original. It's as old as Beachhead is. It's from 1986. I think that's maybe a little too sentimental. That'll be going in the trash. And this is how I've always done it, the way of putting everything back together. I take this post right here on the back, feed it through like that, and then pop that in the back, and it should just hold. So being cautious here, because I don't want to put too much pressure on that waist piece. It feels pretty good. A tiny bit on the tight side, actually. Tiny bit on the tight side. So, just out of curiosity, I'm going to try one of the 82 O-ring rings, just to see if that is not quite as tight. This is a exception situation, because I'm dealing with an extra fragile G.I. Joe waist piece, and also I got that crack in on the peg, so I don't want to add any extra pressure on that. I'm fine with him being a little on the loose side. That actually feels a lot better. So something to wrestle with, something to ponder, that even though the rules say that's the right one, the situation might say something else. I'm a little more comfortable with how that feels, not quite as tight. And then to put them back together, this used to be just so tough when I was a kid, because you kind of need a third hand. If you're lucky, you can get the arm to just hold in there momentarily. This one, not so much. Oh, yeah, it's in there. But then you got the head as well, and the head won't really stay in by itself. So you got to just figure out a way. You can't really lie them flat on the ground. That's never really worked for me. I've always just kind of try to keep all three of these parts held down with a thumb, and then just kind of shimmy the front part on there. Notice it's not something you rush through. It is kind of like surgery. And also, once again, taking into account these are old, brittle pieces, and you don't want to be really rough with them. So before I screw them back together, just kind of test them out. It feels brand new. That's really, really awesome. Feels like a brand new Joe. I got quite a few Joes that are much looser than that, so that's really awesome. And take the screw right here that fell out of them, pop it in there, and same deal, tightening them back up. One little thing I'm going to mention, sometimes it's kind of hard to get that screw through into the post that's on the front part. So all you got to do is just kind of wiggle a little bit and twist, and you'll feel some resistance. I feel it catching in there. So before I tighten it all the way, it feels like I caught it in there a little bit. What I like to do is move the head and one of the arms, and I'm looking for a gap right in here. If it's not tightened all the way, you can see it on this side. There's a little tiny bit of a gap, ever so slight, and if I press it, it closes. That tiny little bit of a gap, that tells me it's not completely tightened, and I don't want to completely tighten. I just gave it a little bit more of a twist, but since he does have a cracked post in there, that is great. That's much less of a gap than I was expecting to have for something like that. Take his loot bag, put it on him again, and suit him up with his backpack, as well as, I don't have his original gun, but this is one of the accessory pack recolor guns, which actually looks really nice with him, the darker coloration. Got a Small Joe's stand right here. You want to be careful with that too. Just ever so slight, let it catch a little bit. I noticed on these Small Joe stands there's always a gap. It doesn't go all the way to the bottom. So in order to, sometimes the gap is much more than that. Sometimes it's like that. So in order to get support on both feet, you can do that. But the problem with that is that all of the pressure is just going onto that one spot and nothing on the other foot. So what I like to do is bend the knee a little bit so that the other foot is actually making contact with the stand, dispersing the weight a little bit. Sitting on your shelf, I don't know if that makes any difference, but I'll tell you where it might make a difference. When he falls off the shelf and hits the ground. I've had that happen sometimes, and that's what I'm going to be working on next. A broken ankle that snapped because the figure was on a stand. I've also had figures posed like this, where the weight was more dispersed. They hit the ground either like that or like that, and the ankle didn't bust. And I'm not sure 100%, but I just wonder if it was the added dispersed weight that saved the figure from getting busted. And I got a few more O-rings to replace here, a couple of other figures. But before I get to that, here's the busted ankle on my Roadblock. And he was up on that shelf. He fell off and snap, busted right off. Now this is not coming off because it's actually crazy glued. So he had fallen once before. This is before I knew about these tapered Small Joe's stands. Might be hard to see it on camera, but the posts are not perfectly parallel. They're just ever so slightly tapered inward. An original G.I. Joe stand is not tapered. It's the same width. So I had my Roadblock on the stand, and I can't remember if the heel had cracked already like that, but it fell and the side of it broke off. And I guess I couldn't find the piece. Sometimes in this toy room, when I drop things, it's really bizarre. The piece goes missing sometimes for months, sometimes for a year, sometimes permanently, and just never able to find it again. But I took what was left of his foot, and because that piece was missing, or maybe it just couldn't be glued back on, I don't know if it was that badly broken, but I crazy glued it onto there just to have him permanently on a stand. And then he fell again, and that time that was all she wrote. So I was hunting for a new foot, or sometimes the cheapest thing to do is just get a new pair of legs. And Rob Culp gave me these. You'll remember Rob from some years back. He gave me his hydrofoil, which I still have. It's down on my new water shelf right there. I still need to install some overhead LED puck lights on that shelf, but that was very generous of Rob, as well as these extra Roadblock legs. So there's a couple of ways to do this. I could take Roadblock apart here. O-ring seems okay. It's a little on the loose side. I could take them completely apart and just pop these legs in instead of these legs. But what's also possible, oh, you see there's a chip right there too. This guy is brutal when it comes to putting them on stands. Some figures are so fragile and just break so often when they're on any stand. Tripwire, looking at you. He is another culprit of that. So definitely want to use something like a Small Joe's stand with that and be very, very gentle with it. Don't force it. And I mentioned earlier some of the figures have more of a gap. That would be one of them. But you're going to want to use that bent knee technique and disperse the weight a little bit on there. So yeah, the one method is to just replace the entire legs, or if you want to be really picky, you'll notice that the paint on this busted Roadblock figure is very nice on the thighs. There's no paint wear on there. The paint on these spare legs, there's a little bit of paint there, and this is so easily touched up. And I love touching up Joe figures, but just for the sake of doing a tutorial video and showing you how to do this, I'm going to actually keep the upper thighs on this Roadblock figure and just use the lower feet on the spare set. So, to show you how that is done, or I should say I'm going to try. This might not go as planned. You never know what these screw posts are going to do. Exact same thing that I mentioned on the back earlier. Just, you got to apply pressure in order to move it, but you want to go slow. And when the initial movement is made, you don't want to go too fast, too far. This one is stuck. That one is stuck. Let's try the other one. That one is also stuck. Both stuck. Now things are going to get interesting. Things are not going as planned here. This Roadblock is made of peanut brittle. He is not like his character. He is not very tough. And as I was trying to unscrew the leg screw, this just snapped right off. This piece right here just broke right off, which there's a post in here for the knee swivel, and that broke right off. And this post is stuck in there. It almost looks like it's part of the plastic, but it's not. So in this case, because it's not moving, I want to take some needle nose pliers and just ever so slightly grab onto it, twist it, and try to pull it out. Get it out of there, because just pushing, should be able to just push on that hole, but it is wedged in. You see, I just broke right off. Peanut brittle. This is some of the most brittle vintage plastic I've ever seen. So when I'm talking about being cautious and careful, and it might seem a little overboard, this is exactly what I'm talking about. It takes absolutely no pressure to break this stuff. So now in order to get this out of here, I need something that's a little bit more pointed. I don't know if this will work, but just trying to get that out of there without breaking the rest of this, because it's all brittle. It's all very, very brittle. So off camera, I've tried to push that through and it won't go. So I think what I'm going to try is using a drill, and you might want to skip the plug-in Makita. I'm going with a battery operated Black & Decker, a little less power, and I'm using my smallest little drill bit there, and I'm just going to try to, the drill bit is smaller than the actual post, so, and this is incredibly difficult to do on camera while I'm also trying to do this repair. Try not to let the drill bit veer too far and actually drill into the figure instead of just the post. Just trying to loosen it up a bit. This is especially tricky with how brutally brittle this plastic is. I don't know if I'll be able to even take the next leg apart. Almost through. Okay, that's completely through. And is any of the original posts still in there? I'm not sure. I guess I'll be finding that out in a few minutes, but I want to unscrew the other leg, and I'm using a bigger screwdriver this time. I find that helps as well. So I've already pre-loosened this, and now, because the other one wouldn't come apart, I get to show you the leg construction of a G.I. Joe figure if you've never seen one before. So once you undo that screw, that will come apart like so. And this is the part that holds the O-ring. Give you a look at it from the inside. There's a little ball on the end, and that is what allows Joe to have all of the movement in the leg, not just front and back like a Star Wars figure, but side to side, kind of splits type of deal. That's one side of it. There's the other side of it. So that steel ball actually goes just up against that and just sits there. Brilliant construction. Was it 40 years? 50 years? I guess Mego was using these before Hasbro. But really brilliant design in order to allow for all of that articulation. All right, got to get that off of that. And in order to do that, I'm just going to try to pop it off. Perfect. All right, and one thing I can actually do with this post is to see if my hole here... did you see that? That was great. So this post actually popped out the remaining original post that was stuck in there. And still a little bit of a tight squeeze when it nears the end there, because it's all gucked up from the years. Okay, so now we've got 2 fresh feet, and here's something I just discovered. Roadblock has 2 left feet, 2 right feet. I don't know. He can cook, but he can't dance. These are identical. Check out the buckles. The boots only have buckles on one side, and they're identical. They should be on opposite sides. And it's like that on this original Roadblock as well. He's got buckles on the outside on this foot. He's got buckles on the inside of this foot. So they're all like that. Cost-cutting measure. Don't even really notice it. But they're both identical. So I don't know, if you're in the situation where you need to replace one of your Roadblock feet, it doesn't matter which one you get. They're all the same. And we'll put my deuce aside here. Now the really tough part is taking apart this good roadblock that's supposed to be part of my collection. So hopefully nothing breaks here. Why am I not undoing the back screw and just completely taking them apart? Because that's just one more thing to break. I would imagine the back post is going to be extremely fragile on this guy too. So my tip, if you're doing legs, because that hole isn't as deep as a backpack hole, use a bigger screwdriver. You got to use these little thin guys to get into the back, but because they're more shallow here, it's a lot more effective. I'm learning just in this video that a real proper full-size Phillips screwdriver is much more effective. Here we go. This is it's gripping pretty good. I don't want to go too fast on this. Take that out, and you should still be able to pull the leg apart even though the hook is still on an O-ring. I think. I'm not sure if I've ever actually done this way before. Okay, so that part is still attached in there. And bolt tar out of the way here. Got to get this busted foot off of this post without breaking it. I wasn't expecting this review to be so tense. I mean, if people felt high anxiety watching me arrange those Joes from the front to back, worrying that I was going to knock them over, this video is not for you. It is pretty tight. Should put in like bomb diffusing music, because that's kind of what this feels like. I initially intended this as a tutorial, but I'm starting to really feel like don't do this. You're only looking for trouble. It's got the same schmutz on the inside, just the wear and tear, dust, grind. You want to get that off as well as you can. Maybe use a brush and get any particles that you can out of there. That's one part. Let's get the leg. And since it doesn't matter, they're both identical, you can't mix them up. And try to get that in there. It is extremely tight. Nobody likes loose, dangly legs, Woody the Cowboy legs on G.I. Joe figures, but I'm almost tempted to drill that hole a little bit more, because that's not sitting properly, and it's not all the way in, and it's just way too tight. So that's asking for trouble. I'm going to shimmy it back off and get that drill bit again. And I'm just going to kind of move it around in there. Try to kind of clean it out a little bit. It's like cleaning cartilage out of a knee joint. You can see a little bit of that. And I'll take loose over breaking any day. It's still really tight, so this is how I do these things, just a little bit at a time. Because it's always better to take off not enough than too much. Once you've taken off too much, it's hard to go back and fill it up again. That looks good. Here we go. Still got some nice grip to it, but it's not way too tight. It feels like it's going to break. And to put the leg back together, you just get that ball into the socket like that. And this post right here needs to go into that hole right there. Fits together perfectly. Screw is still on the tip of the screwdriver. Screw it back together carefully. It's already starting to feel some resistance in there. And on this guy, just like on Beachhead, I don't want to go too tight because he's just going to start snapping. And just like I showed you on the Beachhead figure where there's a gap in the shoulder, there's a gap in the leg. Right there, it's coming apart. So I want to get it a little bit tighter, but I can't tighten it back up to as tight as it was. I don't think. That's plenty right there. Ever so slight, tiny little gap happening there in the leg. Maybe just one teeny tiny little. Okay, that's it. That's definitely it. And the leg is not dangly. It's not the tightest I've ever seen. It's also not the loosest. So very happy with that. His leg is fixed. What an effort just to fix this thing. I guess you could just buy a whole new figure or get a new set of legs and just use the new legs. But I'm kind of committed now that I've done one. I got to do the second one. And try not to break this. There it goes. Hopefully this one goes a little more smoothly than the first one, but I guess I heard a crack in there. Guess it makes for hopefully interesting viewing for you. There was definitely a crack in there. Magnetic tips are so nice for screwdrivers like that. Speaking of things that drop and go missing, these little screws do that. What happened in here? I did hear a crack, but that post looks fine. I felt a crack too, but it seems okay. So we've got not as much damage on the first foot, but this one has damage as well on the heel. So again, try to just, man, is that ever tight. This is one of the toughest Joe repairs I have ever done, just because I'm not used to plastic being this brittle. When I did this as a kid, it was a breeze. Never had parts bust, and there we go. Broke right off. It was too tight and snapped off. But luckily, I got this leg part from the replacement set from Rob. So the paint isn't, there's a little bit more paint wear, but like I said, I don't care. I'm perfectly fine with touching paint up. And the post on that one isn't broken. It's got a lot of schmutz on it though. So that's gonna probably be really tight on there as well. And I might have to drill this hole like I did with the other one, because I doubt that's going to go all the way in. Yeah, exact same thing is happening. It's just stopping at a certain point. So, going to clean that out a little bit. And see. That's pretty good right there. Yeah, I think that'll work right there. Now, I'm gonna pop this leg back together. Screw it back together. Hopefully it holds. And hopefully I don't get the eternally screwing screw. I've had a lot of those in G.I. Joe back holes. The screw that just never stops turning because the post is busted. Not the case here. That post seems fine. That must have just been plastic that was stuck together coming apart. And we still got a little bit of a gap on that thigh there. When I see it, it's perfectly close together, but once you move the leg, there's a gap, a little bit of a gap that opens up there. So I think just another tiny little turn. Oh, still a gap there. And that's all I'm willing to risk it right there. Got some nice tight leg joints. The O-ring in him is fine. I think it's an original O-ring. I've never replaced it. The knees have plenty of grip in them. Let's load him up with the backpack. And something I never realized until like recently, until a few years ago, I always used to do this. I didn't have Roadblock, but my godbrother did. And we always just did that. And I never realized you can actually do that to just, especially if he's on a shelf so that he's not pushing other guys down. Do that. Roadblock absolutely positively needs his mod deuce, which this one's kind of schmutzy. Got this one either on eBay or at a toy show, and I'm not sure if that's paint or some kind of other dirt that I need to clean off. But there's Roadblock. Move these body parts out of the way. And then after all that work and all that being meticulous and careful, is it all for naught? I want to just bend that knee a little bit. This knee seems to be a little stronger than the other one, so I'll go that way. And that's Roadblock repaired. Long time coming. I've been meaning to do that for quite some time. But he's finally fixed, and it was a real pain in the tuchus. But I'm actually glad that I got that all on camera, because that might possibly save some other folks out there some frustration and breakage, especially if it's your original Roadblock with some sentimental value. Hopefully that'll show you what not to do as well as what to do. And there's the original busted foot. And I'm going to replace the O-ring on another figure, one of the later Joes, 91's Tracker. And I want to give a shout out to Caleb for this one. I was looking for a Tracker for a very long time, and I absolutely love this figure. So let's take him apart, and I want to use one of the proper thicker O-rings on this guy. I'm feeling a little more confident with him since he's a later Joe. I mean, 91 was still a long time ago, but I can already tell you this plastic feels stronger than Roadblock's plastic. There's the original O-ring, and there's one of the thicker O-rings that I showed you earlier. Take that out. Looks like there's some original O-ring residue on the hook in there. It just comes off if you scrape it off. And same thing, fish that through there. Wiggle like that. And now take the back. What does that say? Rowan? Rowan, because he rows. And feels nice and tight. Take the head and the arms. And that's an issue that you might run into, having the waist just pop up like that. That's happening because the O-ring is especially tight. Okay, got everything in place. Take the body, and so this one's going to be a little bit trickier. There's a number of different techniques, different methods for how to do this. Just try to kind of jam stuff in there, but don't seal the body, the front and back of the body up just yet. Flat. Have that gap so that you still have enough space to feed the head in, and then once everything is kind of held in place, like so, back screw in there, and tighten him back up. You got an especially loose head, and I think that's pretty much how it's going to stay no matter how tight I make it. I'm not getting a gap there, so the screw is nice and tight in there. Oh, okay. That tightened up a bit. All right, that's tracker. Another one, a long time coming. Sometimes life gets in the way. I've been meaning to replace that O-ring for ages. And there he is, finally repaired. Great figure. One of the great post-80s G.I. Joe figures, Navy SEAL, with perfectly restored O-ring. And I just repaired this Sailor Man off camera. Shipwreck went smoothly, and did this guy as well, Voltar. And here is an issue with Voltar. That screw is all the way in. I'm going to try to undo it and retighten it on camera. See if that corrects it. Squeeze the body all the way together and tighten. Nope, same thing happened. So this screw is all the way in with all my might. Can't tighten it anymore. Head is floppy, and there's a gap. That's just post damage in there, and there is a way to fix it, but that's not something that I feel like doing, because this is actually a spare Voltar figure. The other one I have is perfectly fine, happy with that. This guy will just be a, what is it with dropping birds lately? Kept dropping Captain Cracker's parrot Polly in his video too. But this guy will just be a vehicle driver, so I don't really care. But that's just a heads up that you might run into that too. The posts aren't what they used to be on G.I. Joe figures. It's not just a matter of the O-rings deteriorating and busting on us, but it's also a matter of the posts inside just breaking down, getting more and more brittle. And he's a later figure too, but still decades old plastic, which is not liking the screwdriver all that much. And there's Roadblock, finally part of the collection. And up above, where's Tracker? Whew, these guys all blend together. They're all so colorful. There he is right there. Tracker in there too. That was fun. That's the important thing to keep in mind, even with potentially frustrating stuff like broken parts, broken toys. It's still fun. It's still a great opportunity to play with your toys, fixing them, cleaning them, dusting them. Just try to keep that in mind. If it doesn't make you happy, it's not a hobby, it's a burden. Nerdmas Day. Nerd in me honors the nerd in you.